Okay guys, in this video I'm going to let you know what you shouldn't do and conversely what you should do and give you some general advice which is going to help you to have a way better time when you come and visit Tunisia. If you come here with an open mind but you know what you're doing, you are going to have a much better time. So that said, let's get straight onto it. Now when you arrive, don't assume that you have to get a taxi from the airport. There is another way. There's a couple of buses that run to the city centre. The SNT bus runs around every half an hour, and then there's a slightly more expensive TUT bus which supposedly runs about every 15 minutes. But most likely, you are going to end up getting a taxi. But don't expect a great welcome from these guys. They'll probably refuse to use the meter. You're going to have to negotiate up front, and you're probably going to pay more than you should. But do negotiate hard and don't put up with rubbish from these guys. Personally, I negotiated an upfront price with a taxi driver. He agreed to that, and then during the ride, he was trying to say it was more money. He kept trying to up the price. I was firm and very strong and would not give in to it. And at the end, he got the agreed price and nothing more. But do watch out for that. It's definitely a danger with those guys specifically. But if you do get a negative first experience like that, don't let it taint your judgment of the country. These guys are something special, but Tunisians are really great people, and you're going to have a fantastic time once you get beyond that. It's all up from here. You shouldn't be surprised when local people go out of their way to help you, expecting nothing in return. I've seen such incredible friendliness and helpfulness here. But of course, at the same time, don't assume everyone's like that. There will be some people who are just after your money. They are the minority, and it's really easy to detect which one's which. But about language, don't expect everyone to speak English here. In the northern beach resorts, you're a lot more likely to find people speaking English, but when you're in other parts of the country, and particularly the south, you're going to find very few. The main language spoken here is Tunisian Arabic, and there's also a lot of people speaking French. That's really commonplace, but you're going to have problems getting by in English in a lot of places in the country. You're going to be heavily reliant on Google Translate, and that really does help. It's a lifesaver. Now, one little tip for you that I found: if you're traveling around the country using local transport like the Louages, which I'll talk about in a lot more depth later, then it really helps if you have your destination written in French and Arabic. That way, you can just show it at people to the ticket booths, you can show it around to people if you're trying to find your minibus, and it just kind of helps, and those people will really help you back. But of course, never forget that when you come here, you are travelling to a Muslim country, and you should act accordingly. Even in the less conservative north, Tunisian law still applies to personal relationships. It's technically illegal for mixed-gender couples to stay in the same room in a hotel if they're not married. Now, in actual fact, this isn't really enforced by the hotels, unless one or both of that couple are Tunisian, but it's still worth being aware of. And as a general rule, I'd say if you're travelling as a couple, it's best to use husband-wife rather than girlfriend-boyfriend. It just helps to smooth things and make things a bit easier. Now let's talk a little about money. Don't assume that you can just get by with plastic. Cash really is still king here, and you really need to be carrying some around. It's only in the bigger hotels and more tourist-focused restaurants that you're going to find card payments are accepted. And don't forget to keep hold of some small notes and coins wherever you can. It's really helpful for the small purchases and also tips. Take a little time to familiarise yourself with the coins. It's really not obvious at first what's what. You'll see here the 1 dinar coin is actually very similar to the 2 dinar. You can see here the 2 is just slightly bigger. And when you do need to get some cash, ATMs are readily available, at least in the cities, towns and more tourist-focused destinations. You'll also find ATMs at the airport, of course, before you leave. But don't expect that you can find them everywhere. If you're travelling around the country, it really makes sense to be carrying some cash around with you, at least enough to see you through until the next major stop. Secondly, don't expect to be able to withdraw big amounts. There's plenty of ATMs I've seen that will only let you withdraw 300 dinars. That's less than 100 euros. Not exactly great when you're trying to limit the transaction fees. Some will offer more, even up to 800, which seems to be about the biggest that you can get. Try the STB and BTL banks, they're about the best for this. And thirdly, in some of the smaller towns, don't expect to find the ATMs everywhere. I've seen they're often just clustered in the centre, and then you'll see pretty much none outside of there. And lastly on ATMs, don't expect to be able to use your bank card. I tried my Maestro card around here and couldn't get it to work anywhere. My MasterCard was key, I assume Visa's the same, but you're probably going to need a Visa or MasterCard here. Okay, now let's talk transport. Unless you're getting some full guided tour around the country, you're going to need to know more than a little about how things work here. Firstly, if you decided to drive yourself, rent a car or whatever, don't assume it's going to be like driving in a Western country. Different rules apply here, or, well, don't as the case may be. It's commonplace that traffic rules will be completely ignored, even sometimes in front of the police. And talking about the police, don't forget to slow down and stop at the police checkpoints. There's plenty around the country, and often you're expected to stop. They'll either wave you through, or they'll check your identification. Make sure you've got photo ID, it is the law here. And whatever you do, don't go speeding up to a police checkpoint. The last thing you want to do is make a bunch of guys with guns nervous. That is not a good survival skill. But don't forget, they're not the enemy. They'll be polite. Just be prepared to show your ID when they ask, and you'll be waved through. And when you're driving around the country, don't assume the roads are always going to be good quality like they might be in the city. They can deteriorate quite rapidly in the south of the country, when you'll see unpaved roads, potholes, and quite often what you'll see is sand just blown over the road. And whatever you do, don't try and take your sedan rental car into the desert off-road. Unless you've got a 4x4 and you know how to drive it off-road, just don't. Go with an experienced professional who knows what they're doing and has the right vehicle. Travelling in the desert is an absolutely amazing experience, but it is no joke. Take it very seriously. But don't assume that you need to hire a car and drive yourself. You really don't. There's plenty of public transport options. I didn't hire a car myself, I just got around using the local methods. Now, what's known as the Louages is really the backbone of public transport in the country. It's effectively a shared minibus which does routes between cities, between towns, and sometimes even rural routes. But before I get into how it works, I just want to say don't be put off. It may sound complicated, it may sound daunting, but once you've done it once, you'll find it's pretty easy. You'll get comfortable with it, you'll be right at home. The main thing is, people will help you when you need it. There's just an absolute sea of vehicles in here, it's kind of crazy. That said, let me tell you a little bit about how the Louages actually work. The cities and some of the bigger towns will often have multiple Louage stations, and they'll serve different destinations. So don't assume that the station you're going to is actually the right one. It's best to know, and the only way you can really know is ask a local. Ask in your hotel, or ask anyone else you have the chance to, but do know where you're going. The first thing you need to know is that Louages don't work on a time-based system. They don't leave at a set time. They simply leave when the seats are filled. First come, first served basis. So that can actually be pretty good because it means you don't have to commit to a particular time. You can just go whenever you want. And if you're going at a busy time, you can pretty much leave straight away. In the bigger stations, you'll need to buy a ticket in advance at a booth before you get to the Louage, and there'll often be multiple booths, all serving different destinations. Now the next step, once you have your ticket, which can be quite daunting, is actually finding your Louage. Now in some stations it'll be quite easy. You'll see the name written above a long line of Louages, all going to one particular destination, and then you know to go there. You check with whoever's looking for the tickets there, all good. In other ones, it'll only be written in Arabic or not at all, you won't know where to go, and the best way there is just to ask someone. If you show them the name, written in French and Arabic, oftentimes they'll just go and take you to where you need to go. They're really, really helpful. You're guaranteed you'll be where you need to be before long. At some of the smaller stations, you just go directly to the vehicle and pay there. You never really know until you get to a particular station. Just look around there, ask people if you need to, and you'll find the system. But of course, don't expect that you can always go directly to where you want to go. Of course, there's a kind of hub-based system, just like in trains in Europe. There'll be bigger cities serving a lot more places, there'll be smaller towns maybe only serving a couple of destinations. You need to know where to go and where to change if necessary. So this one, for example, is New Matmata. If you've come down to the Star Wars Hotel and the sights of Matmata, then you'll end up here, quite a way away, like a good 15 kilometers from old Matmata. But this is the Louage station. Small. There's just one there at the moment, you'd hardly know it's there. And so in this case, you buy a ticket in the little window behind there, and then you seem to just wait and you'll be seen on when one appears. And with these journeys, it's all about knowing the regional hubs as well. From New Matmata here, we're not going to get to any really big, long destinations. What I've got to do is change at Gabes, the biggest hub in the area. Now, it's not generally as important, but could be useful to know. There is generally a colour system for Louages, signified by a stripe running down the side of the vehicle. The red stripe minibuses travel from one state to another. Blue travels from city to city within a state, and yellow's a rural line. Likely you'll just be using a combination of red and blue. Now there's a useful unwritten rule when it comes to getting onto a Louage and claiming a seat. The normal thing that people do is when they arrive at the Louage, they'll put their bag or something else down on the seat that they want to claim, and then they'll just go and stand outside until it's full and ready to go. So, encourage you to do the same, but also don't take someone's seat that's put a bag there. They probably won't take kindly to that. Now the front passenger seat by the driver is certainly the most coveted seat there, and that's the first one to get claimed. But don't expect it's actually always the best seat. In some Louages, they'll stick 2 people on that front seat, but you can clearly see when there's a space for 2. Now it really is the best seat when there's just space for 1 there. If you get one of those, it's a real catch, if you just happen to turn up first and claim it first. But there's more than just Louage here. Don't think it's the only way to get around. There's also a train network here, although the trains aren't really the best. The network is kind of infrequent, a little bit slow, prone to delays, and not really very well maintained. I took one train from Tunis to Sousse at the start of my trip, and after that, I did just switch to Louages. But in doing so, aside from the experience of doing it, I actually learned quite a lot about the trains just from talking to a local while we were waiting for the delayed train. Now first class is available, and that's what I opted for, but don't expect it to be what you would expect of first class. It's very badly maintained, there's no air conditioning, it's pretty rough really. But what I will say is the seats are actually dated, but they're pretty comfortable. However, on your ticket, there'll be a carriage number and there'll be a seat number assigned, but don't expect that to actually work. In practice, what you'll find is the carriages aren't actually marked with a number, and often the seats aren't marked anyway, and even if they were, everyone just ignores it. The normal system is that everyone just rushes on, people will be pushing you out of the way to try and get on the train and get a seat first. I even saw people getting on the train while it was still coming in, before it even stopped. So expect that. You're going to need to get on there quick to claim your seat. Don't think that it's just going to be waiting for you. Another option is the bus network. All the major cities have at least one bus station, and it can be quite a comfortable way to travel. Often on the longer journeys, there will actually be aircon for a start. But what you miss with the buses is the flexibility of the Louages. You do have to be there, of course, at a set time. And with the buses, it's really best to just buy your ticket at least a day in advance. Flying domestically is also an option, although not one I chose. But there is airports all over the country, just don't expect them to service the route that you might need every day. Just check the flights using the normal methods online and the normal websites, see what you can find. Now let's talk about getting around within towns and cities. Now taxi is really going to be your primary way, and taxis here must use the meter, but at the same time don't assume they always will. You need to check in advance, like in a lot of places, make sure they're willing to use the meter. If they're not, don't be afraid of just moving on. In my experience, you'll generally find an honest taxi driver just down the road who is willing to. You can always flag down an empty taxi on the road, and also sometimes you can just get in a shared taxi when there's someone else going the same direction as you. Can be quite handy in some places. Now another little thing to note about taxis regarding rip-offs and that kind of thing is that a luggage surcharge is actually a normal thing. That's actually fair, that's not a rip-off if you get asked for that, that's just the norm. But the most useful thing I found there is that in cities like Tunis and Sousse, the taxis can be really busy, and it can be an absolute pain trying to actually get one. There can be multiple people waiting, so it can be a real fight just to get a taxi. Now if you're using Bolt, you don't have that problem of course. You book one, you wait for it, you got the number, and that's it. It really simplifies things there. You do pay a little bit more though, there's definitely a surcharge. It would be cheaper just flagging one down, but it's well worth it for the convenience just using the app. Now I will mention there is actually buses in the towns and cities, but the infrastructure really isn't set up for tourists, so I wouldn't advise using them. There'll be no information on the destination, so you really won't know where you're going. Unless you really know what you're doing, or you're with a local, it's not worth it. Now Tunis is a little unique, in that it actually has a light rail system, which is kinda handy. The metro is an above ground light rail system, and it's actually kind of useful because it serves a couple of the big hitter tourist sites like Carthage and Sidi-Bou-Said. Purchase a ticket before you get on the metro at little booths that are around the metro station. And again, it's really useful just to have the destination written in French and Arabic. And that's really it for transportation. Moving on to a completely different but often asked question, can you drink the tap water? Well, this is a kind of weird one, and I would say don't believe everything you read online, because there seems to be completely differing opinions. Some people say it's fine, other people say no way. Now, what I found from practical experience is that it really doesn't taste very nice. I know that just from cleaning my teeth. Also, wherever you go, you're offered bottled water, and that speaks volumes. So I would say probably veer towards not drinking the tap water here. And another common question, of course, that we all need to know: what's the rules regarding tipping? Well, don't forget to tip here. It really is expected. It's a common part of the culture here in North Africa. If you're too tight with the baksheesh, as it's called here, then you'll be seen as tight, even arrogant. And tipping is pretty much expected even for the smallest service. So, as I say earlier, it's really handy just to carry some small change with you always for these sort of things. Now let's move on to shopping. Now don't forget that as a tourist at least, you are going to need to haggle in a souk or Medina. The price that you're offered is going to be a multitude higher of what it should be, and they'll know just from looking at you that you won't know the real price that it should be. So you're going to end up paying more than a local would, of course you are, but haggling is going to bring it down to a reasonable price. And don't forget, with these things, the key is that both parties walk away happy. So just have fun with it. But don't assume you can haggle everywhere. You're not going to have much luck if you try and do it down a high street shop or in a supermarket. Now, smuggling of antiquities is a problem here which is enforced quite strongly. If you're caught travelling outside of the country with antiquities, then you could be arrested. Make very sure that if you purchase something antique, you have the right permission, you have the right paperwork before you leave. That's going to save you a lot of pain. And that's pretty much all the advice I have to offer you on Tunisia. It's an amazing country, there's so much to see, and there's incredible, friendly, welcoming people. You're going to have a great time here. Just come prepared, know what you're doing, and enjoy your trip. I hope to see you next time, guys.